as I say, it's principled or whatever. So Mencken, in the new constellation, in the constellation of the current party, would hardly be a favorite. Can you imagine Mencken and Louis Gohmert, or want to conjure up? So just last thing, I think Mencken ultimately transcends politics in his love. He kind of right-wing rebel who depends upon the existence of satirical objects. In the United States, this is my last point, sorry to go on. And when Tammy Faye and Jim Baker were having a divorce, they were fighting over an air-conditioned doghouse. That was one of the big fights. And I said to myself, the purpose of the United States is to give pleasure to the rest of the world with all this stuff. And I could go on. There's the Tiger King. Series, it doesn't matter. So forth. My last point, sorry, and then I'll shut up. The idea, given this is a serious point, goes to present circumstances. Given the violent reaction to various government actions, 6 and whatever, I think it's not so kosher to say that somebody's a critic of government and somehow that is something to be proud of abstractly. I think we're in a situation where some of the stuff that's going on is more appropriate for a Hunter L. Thompson kind of phantasmagoria analysis, or Jonathan Swift, who is really bitter. Mencken doesn't, I don't think, quite have that Swiftian bitterness. But I still say there's a lot of room for Mencken precisely because of his literacy. So I just don't think we should try to appropriate him ideologically. It's very hard to appropriate him ideologically, despite a lot of quotes one can pull out. But there are a lot of quotes that Mencken said a lot of things. Anyway, that's what I have to say in the way of introduction.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. You've made notes. Maybe you have comments, and then we should.
I have no comments on Darryl. Everything he said was perfect. I'm trying to flatter.
I think it was just
turning the table.
Preemptive flattery.
Open it up and see what.
What does everybody think about this question of where Mencken fits, or whether the other questions I mentioned? Everybody here is equally qualified to speak to the subject. We all have read Mencken, and we come together when we can. If the health department lets us come together once a year to talk about Mencken.
Well, just anecdotally, what I found at the Mencken Society meetings, it's very diverse. It's diverse on many levels. Many come to Mencken Society for different reasons, but even politically in my discussions, there's no particular homogeneity. A lot of the people I talk to at Mencken are relatively liberal, but not by no means all. So it does seem that there's a broader net to Mencken that goes beyond the political. This is a subject, and appropriately so, I think, of this nonsense, but there's a lot to Mencken and so forth. Yes.
I was actually going to comment on that. Most, if not all of you, are Mencken devotees, aficionados. I am not. I am next door. My brother-in-law is John Charles. That's how I came to know Mencken. But I have read Mencken, and as such, I just have to say, for me, it's not about where he stood politically or philosophically, any of those things. He was just great entertainment, and I just commented a couple minutes ago because there's a copy of Happy Days sitting in the sitting room. There is no better experience than sitting on the steps at 1526 Holland Street and reading Happy Days. I mean, it's the quintessential Mencken experience because I'm sitting right there. I mean, I haven't done it in years, but the first time I got a copy of that and sat on my steps and read that book, I couldn't put it down. But I was right there. I mean, I could smell the dirt in the street. I could hear the horse going by. So I actually see Mencken as, me personally, it's entertainment. And I'm pretty sure he died in 56. I was born in 57. We probably wouldn't have gotten along, but that's not it.
Yeah, you may remember, Daryl or Bob may remember, there's a fellow who used to come to the Mencken Society from San Diego. They had one of the largest collections of Menckians, certainly on the West Coast, maybe in the United States. It's awesome. And he obviously devoted a great deal of time and effort into collecting about Mencken. And he was kind enough to show me through his, or take me to his house. And I asked him, why are you interested in Mencken? How did you get so fanatical with you? And he said, I'm a libertarian. And Mencken was a libertarian. And that's what I became devoted to Mencken for his libertarian views. I suppose if he had any philosophical creed to his political beliefs, it would be libertarian.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, on the other hand, he also realized that libertarianism, when taken to its logical conclusion, ends in anarchy. And I don't think he would have supported that. But I would be surprised if Mencken wrote a check to any political party, any candidate, to anything political. I don't think he was. I think he was critical of the entire system.
Yeah, he's definitely an equal opportunity critic of politicians.
Yeah, including democracy. And if you had to peg him, I suppose you peg him most closely as a libertarian. Peggable.
Although, as you point out, at some point when libertarianism becomes anarchy, one has trouble labeling it conservative.
Right. Civil rights, he was very strong.
He was pretty good, yeah.
Final column, supported the trying to get in on lynching bill, and supported the NAACP, and so on. He wasn't afraid to take on these things. He had a political reason to be.
But once again, it had to be gotten rid of first locally. I mean, he was, as I understand it, prepared that Maryland had Strom Thurmond on the ballot in 48. He was going to vote for Strom Thurmond, even though, of course, he was pushing for the desegregation of all kinds of things locally, but it's got to be from the bottom up, not imposed by the feds, in his mind. Fortunately, Baltimore had one of the most active NAACP chapters in the country. Third and Marshall.
I'm wondering if I know that my wife has read A Choice of Days, and I don't think I've ever seen her laugh so much at something she read when she was reading that. It's kind of the compilation of the 3 volumes. So I wonder if both of you could talk a little bit about Mencken and humor and pleasure in an age that seems to be very humorless in many ways. And that would be interesting. I'd be interested to hear both of your thoughts on that.
Well, since I'm teaching a course on Jewish humor right now, of all things, one of the striking features of it so far, and I'm only into the 3rd week, but I'm relatively convinced, and it doesn't take much to say, Jewish Americans, Jewish people have a long history with Christendom and Christians and Gentiles, which obviously makes some sense. And so they also, though, I think, have a certain relationship with Yahweh that doesn't always go well, meaning that they have a kind of chip on their shoulder, or they could have a chip on their shoulder, which produces a kind of irreverence, which I think is really characteristic of classic Jewish American comedy. It gets watered down in all sorts of ways. And there's a great movie about a documentary about Jewish comics called When Jews Were Funny. And it reflects on the degree to which assimilation, rising socioeconomic status, going to the suburbs, if Jewish comics lost their edge, so that Jerry Seinfeld is not what some of the vaudeville folks were. But I mean, I think Mencken, Jewish comedy really becomes prominent with 40s, 50s, Hollywood, TV, and the like. And it's not as if Mencken was unaware of Jewish Americans. He worked with Knopf throughout most of his life, but whether he was influenced in any way by that kind of Jewish irreverence, I don't know. I don't think so. I think it becomes much more pervasive later, but Mencken does have an irreverence. I mean, that's what's so biting about his humor. And when I present Mencken in class, students aren't sure whether they're supposed to laugh or not, whether they can. But it's the same thing when you watch some of the Jewish comics. They're saying things that is this really permissible to say? So in that sense, I mean, his humor does have this really sharp edge to it, which puts a lot of people off. I mean, I think it picks up on.
Daryl, I think it put him off at his time as well.
Right. No, but I mean, I think
He was pleased with that.
right. But it does, it's not a kind of white middle class Protestant outlook.